Chapter 27, Empire and Expansion, 1890 to 1909. Okay, intro. This time is really something called the Age of Imperialism, not only in the United States, but other places in Europe as well. We see a lot of Western European countries really starting to take over places in Africa. We see a lot of Eastern European countries starting to take over places in Asia. And America at this time really steps up to the plate as well and becomes an empire, if you will. The idea being that we're expanding beyond our borders into places like Puerto Rico, into places like the Philippines, and getting involved with world politics more and more. And, we had been busy. After the Civil War, we had a period of Reconstruction, and then we were focusing during the Gilded Age of really rebuilding our economy, improving these new cities that are booming, founding is probably not the word, settling the West. So America was a little late in the game when it came to imperialism because we had so much stuff going on. But this is really the age of empire. So Section A, America turns outward. So the question is, why the shift? Before we were kind of isolationists, really focusing on growing, developing our country. Why now this move to go out of the United States, looking elsewhere? There's a couple answers you can give. One was the fact that if we expanded, that gave us almost kind of like a global market. If we were expanding, say, into Puerto Rico, we had now a place to trade with, like a little baby colony sort of idea. So the global markets, it was a big idea, having farmers have a place to sell their crops, having factories having a place to sell their, neckties, things like that. So finding new markets for our goods. Another thing that really brought us out of our shell was the yellow press. We've talked about this before. The yellow press really started in New York City between two kind of rival newspapers in New York, one published by Pulitzer, one published by Hearst. Yellow journalism, the idea that you put really sensationalized headlines, really dramatic stories to try to get people to buy your paper. Not necessarily the best journalism you would ever see, but it really grabbed people's attention. Well, the yellow press was at it again, and they really wrote about these, foreign exploits as very manly, very adventurous, really kind of like Indiana Jones, going off to unknown places and making discoveries. They really glamorized it, so people started to look outward as well. Another reason we have is missionaries. There's a book published that was very influential in this regards, and it was by Reverend Josiah Strong. It was called Our Country, Its Possible Future, and Its Present Crisis. And really, it was an argument that Anglo-Saxon white civilization was superior to all of these other civilizations out there, and it was kind of our Christian duty to spread our religion, but also our kind of American values, our culture, that sort of thing, to these backward people. So Josiah Strong really put a fire in the missionaries' hearts to go to these foreign lands and to seek converts. Also, surprisingly, the idea of Darwinism kind of crept in as a justification for expansion. The idea that America was the best, clearly, right? America was the best, and because we were the best, it was only natural, right, that we would go to these other countries and conquer them. Survival of the fittest, after all, we should be on the top. It's only natural that America goes and spreads its awesomeness other places. Probably fifth reason here I'm going to give is the fact that we were building up a wonderfully powerful Navy, and because of that, we kind of wanted an excuse to use it. Another influential book, this one by Captain Alfred Thayer. Okay, Captain Alfred Thayer Mahan. Okay, Captain Mahan writes in 1890 a book called The Influence of Sea Power Upon History. And this is really arguing, saying, looking at history, don't we all love history? Of course we do. We notice that the best of the best empires, the strongest, the most powerful, the most influential empires were influential because they had a strong navy. And this book really put a fire under us to start building up our own navy, and we see actually other countries start to build up their navies. So it's kind of like an arms race, so to speak, when it comes to building up the navy, and this is happening all around the world. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some manifestations of these international interests. Kind of our first steps, if you will, towards this imperialistic idea. The first step comes from our Secretary of State, James Blaine, and this policy he comes up with is called the Big Sister policy, like big sister, little sister, that sort of thing. And with this, it's the idea that we need to get the Latin American nations behind America's leadership. Making sure that their markets are open to American trade, really kind of putting them under our thumb a little bit. We're the big sister, they're the little sister. We're going to help them out, but they better stay loyal to America in return. And a fruit of this policy is the first International Conference of American States, where they meet together for the first time. Really kind of America kind of putting the Latin American countries under their thumb a little bit. All right, this section ends by talking about a lot of almost wars. Crises that were on the brink of war, but not quite all the way there. And some of these crises don't seem very major today, but hey, they almost led to war back in the day. So let's talk about some of them. One, we almost get into a war with Germany over the Samoan Islands. It ends up being settled and it's fine. Germany, America kept their islands. Germany gave up some of their islands. You don't really know you don't need to know the details, but just know we almost went to war with Germany over some islands in the South Pacific, the Samoan Islands. All right, in New Orleans, there were 11 Italians who were lynched, meaning killed, because they were Italian, right? And that almost brought us to war with Italy, but the United States decided to pay some compensation to the Italians, and that blew over sooner than later, but almost went to war over 11 deaths. Let's see, what else? In Chile, 2 American sailors were killed. We almost went to war there, but the Chileans decided to pay us some compensation for that, so that blew over. This one's a fun one. We almost went to war with Canada over the right to hunt seals off the coast of Alaska. Really? Seals? All right, enough said. We had some arbitration. We figured out the seal hunting. We didn't go to war with Canada. So these instances, the Samoan Islands, the incident with Italy in New Orleans, Chile, seal hunting off the coast of Alaska. This really goes to show the willingness of Americans to risk war over really what are, in a big perspective, minor events. And it really just shows our kind of new aggressive mode we're in, or should I say mood we're in. Another crisis worth mentioning is a crisis we get into with Britain in 95 and 96. And what happens is Britain owns Guyana, okay? And Venezuela and Guyana, which is owned by Britain, these are South American countries, are disputing a border. And that border has always been in dispute. The line had always been fuzzy between the two countries. But then gold was discovered, and that crisis definitely took off because everyone wants gold, because everybody does, clearly. So what happens more or less is President Cleveland decides to get involved, okay? And he sends Secretary of State Richard Olney, and what they do together is they invoke the Monroe Doctrine, stating more or less that the U.S. calls the shots when it comes to the Western Hemisphere. And what they said is they went to Britain and clearly stated, hey, we're going to send a group of experts down there. They are going to determine the border, and you're going to accept that or else. All right. So Britain could very well just be like, what are you talking about, America? Our Navy could crush you in 2 seconds, as they probably have in the past. But instead, Britain kind of takes the higher road and says, fine, we'll agree to that. That's fine. And this choice of accepting our authority, more or less in the Western Hemisphere, really leads to a really positive relationship with England, which we didn't always enjoy. And this period of time where we're very friendly with England is kind of referred to as patting the eagle's head. The eagles being America, patting it, being like, we're friends now, yay! And this actually becomes important when it comes to World War I, because we'll see the United States being a very good ally of England. So this is when patting of the eagle's head starts. All right, section B. Lovely, we're only on section B. Spurning the Hawaiian pair. So, like I said, we're talking about imperialism, so we're going to be kind of jumping all over the globe in this chapter, looking how America's interacting with different locations. So we're talking about Hawaii right now. So before really Hawaii, the only use for it was a good place to stop to refuel, because at this time ships were powered by coal. So it was a very opportune place in Hawaii to stop to refuel. Well, slowly over time, missionaries started to go to Hawaii to convert the natives, but while they're there, they also decided to make some money. So they started to set up things like pineapple farms, that's probably not the right word, and sugar plantations, that sort of thing. Problem was, the whites came and so did all of their diseases, and about 5/6 of all Hawaiians natives died. They died. So now there's a bunch of white guys there wanting to plant sugar, and they don't have any workers because everyone died. A lot of people died. So they start importing workers from Asia. So after a while, really what it was a bunch of white Americans and a bunch of Asians growing sugar. So the deal was that at this time, this is not a part of the United States at all. It's not a territory, it's not nothing. It's just Hawaii, and America more or less kind of stuck their claim unofficially on Hawaii. And Hawaii is under control of their queen. I cannot pronounce her name. I'm not even going to try, but let me find in my notes I can spell it, because that I can do. Queen of Hawaii. Her name is Liliuokalani. Liliuokalani. How is that for service with a smile? Anyway, well, she's still the queen. But the problem is things are going well until the McKinley Tariff is passed in the United States. Remember, the McKinley Tariff is that super, super duper high Republican tariff that's passed. And here's the issue. Now, the sugar grown in Hawaii is very, very expensive in the United States because it has that really high tax on it. So now, people don't want to buy Hawaiian sugar because they can find sugar cheaper elsewhere. Right? Generalizations here. So what the farmers in Hawaii want to do, at least the landowners, they want to make Hawaii a part of the United States. Because if Hawaii is part of the United States, that tariff would not be placed on their sugar. More people would buy their sugar. They would make more money. That would be awesome. So wanting to kind of find a loophole around this really high tariff, there's the whites in Hawaii more or less kind of incite this rebellion against the queen. They take over and try to kind of shove through an amendment annexing Hawaii into Congress. Well, the problem is President Cleveland, he's too moral to accept that idea. He's looking in Hawaii and saying, no, I get it. You can't just overthrow a queen because you don't want to have your sugar taxed. That's not how it works in America. So for the time being, Hawaii is kind of left alone. But we'll see in this chapter we actually will annex Hawaii as a territory. But just not yet. Okay, section C. This Cubans rise and revolt. So this is actually going to be more or less the roots of a bigger conflict called the Spanish-American War. And we'll spend a whole bunch of time talking about this, so just hold on tight there. All right, Cubans rise and revolt. So in 1895, the people of Cuba revolted against their Spanish oppressors. So the island of Cuba was owned by Spain. People in Cuba didn't like to be owned by anybody and revolted. Okay. So what their strategy was to just kind of terrorize all the Spaniards there. They had kind of the scorched earth policy. So they torched cane fields, sugar mills, blew up trains, that sort of thing. And here in America, people are cheering for the underdogs, because America, we love the underdogs, because hey, we at one time were as well. All right, and plus Americans had invested a whole bunch of money into Cuba, about 50 million, your book says, and then an additional 100 million each year in business they did with Cuba. So it was economically also important for us as well. All right, so what happens? Okay, the Cubans are all revolting. I shouldn't say all, but some of the Cubans are revolting. So Spain sends in a general to squash the rebellion. This guy's name is General Weyler. It's like a whale swimming across the ocean to Cuba to crush the rebellion. Okay, so General Weyler has the nickname of General Butcher Weyler, kind of indicating he wasn't the nicest person to be around, especially if he wanted to crush you. So what he does is he gathers citizens of Cuba into these kind of concentration camps. Very, very poor sanitation, very, very bad food. A lot of people die because of disease, that sort of thing. And his theory was if you gathered enough, what are they called? Cubans together, citizens together, those citizens can now not help the rebels. Okay, so now the rebels don't have any help, they'd be easier to crush. But a lot of people die, not a really good thing. And the yellow press, Pulitzer and Hearst in New York, they are all over this. This is headlines. So they really, really kind of overemphasize, I probably shouldn't say overemphasize, but really bring forth to American people the atrocities in Cuba. Sometimes, of course, stretching the truth just a little bit. By that I mean a lot. So, for example, they intercept a letter the Spanish ambassador sent that more or less sees one of the Spanish ambassadors like really dissing the president. And Americans are like, oh no, you didn't. You did not just diss our president, although it was a private letter we stole from you. That doesn't matter. They were really mad. So this note makes people really mad at Spain. Okay. Another thing that makes us very mad, or I should say really sets us over the edge, was an explosion. What happened is the United States had sent down a battleship to Cuba. Just in case things got, a little out of hand, it was a way for American citizens to kind of flood into the battleship and then, sail away. So it was kind of a safety valve for any Americans on Cuba. Well, anyway, this ship, the USS Maine, all of a sudden explodes. Boom! Right? People are sent down to investigate. Spain says it was an accident. Americans are convinced it was torpedo fire. And so throughout America, we hear the chant, remember the Maine, the hell with Spain. Remember the Maine, the hell with Spain. They want war, and they want it real bad. Something I failed to mention that I do want to mention now is when we're talking about the yellow press really extending the truth, stretching the truth. A famous quote at this time was that, was it Hearst? I think it was Hearst. Yeah, Hearst sent a artist or like a painter down to Cuba and said, you furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war. War really meaning you furnish the pictures, I'll furnish the war, really meaning that, hey, we can make something big out of something that might eventually blow over. Anyway, well, now Americans were just super ticked off at Spain, and they were demanding war. But President McKinley was kind of unsure. They called him Wobbly Willie, and people hated that he wasn't just going to ask Congress to declare war. They're burning his image in effigy. Like, not very good. They wanted war. So finally, McKinley decided to ask Congress for war to help free the oppressed Cubans. The deal was there was a lot of Americans in America that really didn't like this idea. because this really smelled of imperialism. They thought, well, we're going to go help free the Cubans. Then are we just going to take over Cuba? What's going to happen to Cuba? I don't want to take over Cuba. That's not American. So to help kind of pacify that, Congress, while they declare war on Spain, also passed something called the Teller Amendment. You should know the Teller Amendment. The Teller Amendment more or less says, yes, we are going to fight against Spain to help free the Cubans, but once we do that, we're not going to take Cuba. We're going to give the Cubans their freedom. All right. Section D, Dewey's May Day victory at Manila. All right, so Americans are very giddy. They're very excited about this war. So even before the war is officially declared, Theodore Roosevelt, who is the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, calls up a guy. His name is Dewey, the guy from the title. Dewey, he is the captain of this fleet of American ships that is by Hong Kong. And Theodore Roosevelt tells Dewey, hey, we're at war with Spain. You're right next to the Philippines. The Philippines are owned by Spain. Why not go to the Philippines and show Spain who is boss? This is a strange idea, right? Because we're saying we're fighting this war to free the Cubans. So it's not super clear how fighting in the Philippines connects to freeing the Cubans, other than the fact that we'll probably blow up some Spanish ships. But nonetheless, Dewey heads down to the Philippines. And there he finds this really antiquated, meaning very old, kind of rickety fleet of Spanish ships at Manila Bay, and we just crush them. We blow them up. I think there's about 10 ships. They're over with. They're done. About 400 Spanish are killed. 0 Americans are killed. The problem, though, is now that, they exploded all these Spanish ships, they don't have any backup. So they can't really go and invade the Philippines yet. They have to wait, and they do, for I think 3 or 4 months till American reinforcements can come, and then they finally invade the Philippines themselves. And something to keep in mind as well is it's not just the Americans fighting the Spanish, it's the Americans alongside some Filipino rebels who are also trying to overthrow Spain at the same time. And one of the, you could say the Filipino rebels, that's the word, the Filipino rebels are led by a guy by the name of Emilio Aguinaldo. Emilio Aguinaldo heading up kind of the Filipino side of the rebellion, and then of course the Americans are there too with Dewey, and they really just take over Manila Bay, and more or less that's all we need to talk about when it comes to the Philippines during this war. We got that. We're good. That sort of thing. Yes. So something kind of as a side note to mention, we're going to think about Hawaii again. Thinking about the location of Hawaii, it's very, very conveniently located in proximity to the Philippines. So now that we're fighting Spain in the Philippines, it's a very ideal place to have in order to refuel. So during the Spanish-American War, that's when we finally do officially annex Hawaii. Hawaii becomes a territory of the United States. Not a state yet, but still a territory. So that's when that, annexation of Hawaii happens during the Spanish-American War, and our justification is it's a wonderful place for ships to refuel on their way to the Philippines. All right. Section E, the confused invasion of Cuba. Okay, so just to make this clear, we're fighting the Spanish-American War. We're fighting it against Spain, but we're fighting it in 2 different locations. One location is the Philippines. We kind of talked about that. And now we're going to be talking about the other location. We're fighting Spain in Cuba. So now we're talking about Cuba. Okay, so there are kind of 2 groups fighting, 2 sections of the American army fighting in Cuba. One, we have the foot soldiers, and that's led by General William Shafter. And just as a note, he is crazy overweight. Like, people carry him around on a door. I don't really even know what that means. Does that mean he can't walk? I don't know. But just the idea that someone's carrying someone on a door, that usually means he's pretty overweight. And also the troops are very ill-equipped for the tropical climate. A lot of American soldiers are wearing like wool uniforms, that sort of thing. So just totally not adept at this tropicalness, which is Cuba. So the foot soldiers, General William Shafter, and also we have a group of cavalry volunteers. And these are the famous guys. These are the guys that get beer commercials made after them. These are called the Rough Riders. I do not condone the drinking of alcohol underage, by the way. These are Rough Riders, and they're, volunteer cavalrymen, meaning they're on horses. These are cowboys, ex-cons, ex-polo players that are eager for a fight. And they are led by two people. One is General Leonard Wood, but the other, the more famous, is our friend Theodore Roosevelt. He will become president. People call him TR, Theodore Roosevelt. So Theodore Roosevelt kind of gets more of the fame, but he's in charge of the Rough Riders along with Leonard Wood, and then we have General Shafter with kind of the foot soldiers. There's a couple of big battles here. One happens at Kettle Hill, one happens at El Caney. Both of these Americans suffer heavy losses. But finally, this war comes to the end when we're able to capture the Spanish fleet at somewhere. Where is it? I don't know. Oh, Santiago. There it goes, finally. So the Spanish fleet is more or less in Santiago. So when we really destroy the Spanish fleet at Santiago, that is when, Spain gives up. They're like, okay, we'll sign an armistice. We can end this war. All right. It's called the Confused Invasion of Cuba. I hope I confused you, because that's how it's supposed to be. But something to note with this invasion of Cuba, that it could have been much differently had Spain just held out for a couple more months, because so many Americans were not dying of bullets, but dying of bacteria, meaning they're dying of disease. So it's well known that had the Spaniards held out just a little bit longer, America probably would have been forced to give up because so many were dying of disease. And when all was said and done, about 400 Americans were killed by bullets, but about 5,000 Americans were killed by a bacteria. Also notably, there was some really bad meat that made its way into the hands of the American soldiers that didn't help the cause at all. And with that, I think we're done with this video.